So welcome everyone. My name is Guillaume Wiatr. I am the principal and founder of MetaHelm. MetaHelm specializes in strategic storytelling for CEOs and executive teams of established companies. Sometimes I will work with a startup because I'm passionate about this topic. What I do is that I say we, but MetaHelm is me. Here is the global headquarters of MetaHelm. What I do is that I help entrepreneurs, business leaders unlock profit alignment, basically make their business run better by helping them write a shared narrative grounded into their purpose. I would like to tell you a little bit about the strategic narrative underground session that you are in today. It's a brand new concept that I launched last week. It's based on the advice of Philippe here in the meeting. And I put the concept together in 48 hours and published it to my list. What are we doing during these sessions? I am writing a book. It's a pattern language. And the intent of the session is to give you a guided tour in form of a flash course of some of the parts, some of the chapters of this book. At the moment, I have 10 chapters written. I have a list of 38 total. So I've got a few more to write. And the intent of this session together is to do what I call writing in public. I am inviting you to have access to my thinking around an idea that is emerging. It's unfinished. It's a work in progress. And at the end of this call, I will give you access again, if you weren't there last week, to this manuscript. It's a Google Doc, and I will give you access to comment on it. I know that some of you have been very active in reading and posting comments, so I want to thank you for this. That's the experience, and that's the collaborative nature of this work. So I take feedback very seriously. Feedback takes courage, and it's not always easy, but I feel like it's a very valuable exercise. So with that, let me see here. I wanna look at my notes for just a second. I forgot to tell you last time, but I wanted to make sure this is clear, that I record those sessions, and my intent will be to share them on YouTube publicly. Please turn on your camera if you can. It's always so much better to see who is here and just have a good conversation. If you're willing to do that, that would be really great. We're together for 30 minutes, so another 26. And during this call, I'm going to go over the first pattern of this book, and it's called narrative. It's probably the most important pattern, maybe, because this book is about the concept of strategic narrative. So I'll just pause here, look at my notes. Did I forget anything? I don't think so. But I'm still letting people in. Just want to ask you if you have any questions at this point. All right. Well, let's keep going. I'm going to start with a story, in fact, this morning. The story is about it's a well-known story here in the area of Seattle. Can you guys see my screen? It's a story of the Klondike gold rush. And the story is about a young man in around 1887 or so. This young man is 16 years old. and he left Sweden to go to the United States, and he arrived in New York with $5 in his pocket. He can't speak English, and he's an immigrant. And at first, he works in the mines, in logging camps across the country, and then goes to California and then Washington. And in 1897, he hears rumors and he hears stories about people finding gold in Alaska and in a specific spot called the Klondike River. And this is a very well-known story, of course. And he embarks on this adventure and goes to Alaska. And a few years later, returns to Seattle with $13,000 in his pocket and ready to settle down. As he's in Alaska, he meets another guy called Wallin, and this guy is a shoemaker in Seattle. And Wallin offers this young man to get into a partnership and to run the shoe store with him. And in 1901, they opened their first store called Wallin and Nordstrom.
No, I canceled that. I'm on something else right now.
Hey, David. Good morning. Thanks for joining.
Sorry, was I unmuted there? My apologies.
You were unmuted. No worries. That happens to everyone. I just want to acknowledge your presence since we heard you. So welcome.
Guillaume, it might be a good time to say, I'm not sure if we can see your screen. I see a white stripe.
My bad. Okay. How about, is this different now?
Yes, that's much better.
Can you see a photo?
I can see miners panning for gold, it looks like, or digging for gold.
Great. That's an iconic photo of what the Klondike gold rush looked like. So that was the story of Nordstrom, and Nordstrom then went on to start this chain of stores, and now is the retail store that we know. And what's interesting in this story is to look at a few things here. The first one is that the reason why Nordstrom got compelled to join the gold rush is because he heard those stories. And I look at the gold rush as a narrative. It's and that's what we're going to explore today. That's the first chapter of the pattern language here, because I make a difference between stories and narratives. And narratives are very important. They're very powerful. They make people do incredible things. And if you're in business, if you have a business, narratives are critical because they help you figure out your strategic positioning. And in fact, in the late 1900s, lots of stores opened doors in Seattle to sell equipment to Klondikers, to people going to find gold. It was actually a requirement by the city that you had to go buy a certain list of stuff. There was actually a very hefty list. If you go to the Klondike Museum in Seattle, you can see all the stuff that people had to carry. It was just such a ordeal to carry all of that. But that narrative in itself just boosted, made the Seattle economy completely boom. And it's some say that the Klondike gold rush partly was at the source of and helped help the economy nationwide. So what we can see here is that Nordstrom was invited to a new adventure because the narrative that he had heard through those stories is that he could win big, he could transform himself. But if you look at the statistics, only 2% of the people of the 100,000 people who went to the Klondike River actually came back and with something called a fortune, something we can call a fortune. So that narrative made an incredible amount of people take radically crazy decisions, crazy decisions, and really, move into action. So narratives are a call to action. That's how they differ from stories. Stories live in the past. They are closed-ended. They happened already. Narrative have this open loop. There is a beginning, there is a middle, and it's up to you to create the end. I want to tell you another story of maybe another narrative. You probably know this guy. He's called Dick Frostbury. He's also a local from the Northwest. He's from Oregon, and he is very well known for the way he does the high jump, the high jump. And he started jumping like that in the 60s. Previous to him, this is a quick visual history of the high jump. I'm not a high jumper, but it started. People would jump, in the Caesar fashion, and then they would do the Western roll in the 1912 era, and then the straddle. And everybody was convinced that the straddle was the best way to do it. It was the most advanced way to do high jump until Frostbury came in and said, we're going to do this another way. And the way I look at the story again is the confrontation of two narratives, a dominant one that used to be the straddle jump, and a new one, an innovative one called the Frostbury jump. And at first, Frostbury, so first of all, Frostbury was never one of the best athletes. In fact, he won the 1968 Mexico Olympics because of the technique. But then after that, everybody used the technique and stole the technique from him. And most athletes were way better than him. So Frostbury, won that competition, not because he was the best, not because he was the strongest, but because he was thinking differently. But at first, that wasn't very easy. He actually faced quite severe pushbacks, even from his coach. And what we can learn here is that a new narrative, if I can make the analogy that high jump is a market, when you come in with an innovation and introduce a new narrative, it's not a given. You're going to face criticism. People would comment on Frostbury's way to jump and say, well, he looks like a very clumsy animal. We have no idea what he's trying to do. This is never going to work. Even his coach were really, really skeptical about it until he started showing some results there. But what Frostbury did is that he really embraced his constraints, and he created this new way to jump because he figured out that if you jump with a lower center of gravity, you have more control and you can go higher, in fact. What his strength was that he had an engineering background. And so he was not using his athletic abilities, but he was using his engineering, his technical abilities to compete and get better. So there are a few things that we can draw, a few insights here that are in the first chapter of my pattern language. And I would like to try something that I've not done before. I'd like to sketch a little bit, and maybe you can help me and tell me if the sketch makes sense. And if it does, then I'll add it to the book. So let's get a whiteboard. All right, and let's see what this will get us.
Guillaume, could you take it off of screen share so we can see you large?
Oh yeah, of course. Thanks, Lauren. Is that better? Can you guys see this? Cool. All right. So I was practicing last night. This is my practice sheet. Researching some ways to draw this, because if we can't come up with a very simple visual concept to encapsulate this idea of narrative versus story, I think this will help a lot of people. And this will help all of us, stay in the right mindset for that. So what I came up with is this. So if you think about a story, so it's almost like a loop. So there's probably there's a beginning, there's a first, stage, and then there's a middle here, and then there is an end. If I go back to Nordstrom, that's what called him to try this new narrative, which was, hey, I heard some people left their town, went to Seattle, they traveled far to Alaska, they got some gears with them, they got in a team. It was really, really hard, and they looked for gold forever. Some of them got injured and some died, but a few of them came back and got rich and invented and came back and had a better life. And the story is done. The thing with story is that they like I said, they happen in the past. They're closed-ended. You're not the hero of the story, but it kind of confirms a belief. It kind of confirms what's possible. So it provides evidence that there might be a new way to look at something and do something differently. So if you are in a business and you are interested in creating a new story, you can look at this way and say, what are the stories that happened in the past that got us to where we are today? Maybe it's your origin story as a founder. Hey, I was running into, I didn't know how to go to work in an efficient way. And I was really concerned that every day when I used my car, I create a lot of CO2 emissions. So I wanted to come up with a better method. And I invented an electric vehicle. Maybe that's the origin story that I'm talking about here. Now, on the other hand, the way I would represent a narrative is a loop that starts with a beginning. And maybe there is some development here until the middle. But everything after that is a dotted line. And maybe we don't know here. There is unknown. There is room for innovation. There is room for progress. And there is room for risk too. It's very uncertain. That's the world that a lot of tech startups live in. They're in this framework right here, whereas more established businesses would probably be somewhere around here. If I think about, I don't know, help me out, find very traditional, I'm thinking about a attorney practice. We know the process already. It's been, around for hundreds, maybe thousands of years. And the story is really, really established. It's really there. The narrative that frames the profession of attorney is quite closed already. There's not a lot of room for differentiation, improvement, innovation. But the major opportunity that I see between those two ways to look at stories and narrative is that this right here is just like, it's like a window. Towards something different, hopefully better. Something
Guillaume,
that, yeah.
Could you maybe draw a little bit bigger, because we can see
hard
the
to see.
drawings, but they're kind of small.
How about that?
That's better. That's helpful.
I'll try bigger. Thanks for the feedback.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. So I'll try my best, David. So there's a call to action here. We're inviting people to a new adventure. And one of the powers of narrative is that it draws people into doing something differently. So when you are creating a new narrative, such as Frostbury, you want to look at a new way that people can replicate also. In fact, very, very quickly after the 1968 Olympics, everybody started to jump like Frostbury. They could all do it. They just didn't think about it. They just didn't dare doing it. So this requires courage here. This requires to, be maybe an early adopter and then later on, follow the crowd. So here is the difference between story and narrative. Another thing I wanted to say about this difference here, as I was taking notes last night, and then I'll ask you a question, is that it's almost like there is a continuum here, something that could help you position your business more consciously, which would be maybe like, am I trying to imitate a story that happened already in the past? In which case, what I'm probably after is something like optimization. Or am I trying to create, David, I'm doing my best. I don't know if that's any better. Am I trying to create a new narrative to really transform the way we do something? A lot of people advertise themselves as transformational. They call them disruptors. They have, early this morning, a client of mine was showing me a website of somebody in their industry that is really bold, has these big fonts and those big words, but you can't really exactly tell what is it that they're transforming. They're not inviting you to a new narrative. They didn't build their business model on a call to action, on something that draws people in to take the risk that are required to go somewhere else. It's just really facade. So all of the visual identity there, it's really great for this type of tendency, but the business is not really transformative. I know some other businesses who are really, really creative, really change the way their industry and their clients work, but they have a hell of a difficulty to explain why this is really different, because they are really focused on telling the old story, the things that have happened before. All right, I'll stop there. This is an experiment. It's really the first time I draw these sketches here, and I'd like to ask you in a few minutes, can you guys think of any story that have created new narrative, either in society, history, or in your business, maybe?
The first one that comes to my mind is Airbnb, because it certainly impacted our travel lives, right? Some people live via available Airbnbs. And that is an unfinished story because it impacts communities, and there's now legislation and, a lot of sub movements. So I think that's a great one. And when they were developing that idea, of course, they ran it past a number of people who thought they were flipping crazy, like who would ever do that? So it went through its own periods of adjustment, and it's also, made the world smaller, right? My wife and I love to travel via B&Bs and Airbnbs. So that's a favorite story of mine.
So on this axis here, where would you position Airbnb?
Oh, pretty far to the right. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think they're also, if I look at their narrative, is, there's the sense of community, which is something we talked about last week in the session number 1. It's really characteristic of a narrative. Narrative is really about creating a sense of community. What I mean by community is really in the broadest sense possible, including your customers, your partners, your employees, but also your competitors sometimes. We had a good conversation with Lauren about how narratives really transcend this idea of competition almost. It helps you just get over this. One linking back to Frostbury knew that all of his competitors were going to steal his technique, right?
Right.
He knew that this technique was easily replicable, but he had an edge for a while. All right, we have a few more minutes maybe for another example. I have some more, but I'd like to hear it from you.
This might be an obvious one, but the one that I was thinking of while you were talking is the moonshot, like Kennedy saying, we're going to go to the moon. And like, this is something humanity has never done before. We don't know how we're going to do it, but if we work together, we can accomplish it. And that to me, like, resonates with the Klondike. Like, here's something that we can accomplish out of the unknown.
Yeah, going to the moon. He said it very, very simply too. We'll send a man to the moon and return him safely in the next decade or something like that.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be complex. Sometimes the best one's simple.
Exactly. If you're thinking about, hey, we want to craft a better story for a business, doesn't have to be overcomplicated. But maybe if we're calling people, if we're claiming we're different, maybe it has to open a door for a different future.
Yeah, I have a. Do you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, I have a lot of companies.
Hi,
in mind.
Francois.
Hi. For example, all the kind of bikes sharing you can find in the cities. Mm-hmm. So I found it's something at the beginning. It's very easy just to say that you have a sharing pool of bikes, and everywhere you want to go, you just have to beep your card or to have a subscription if you want. But if you just want to use it once, you can do it. And for me, it's something very easy, and it's it's a very new narrative. You just let you the occasions to move from one part to the other part with no car or no taxi, and it's a new way to move across the city. For me, it's quite new. And to go at the same things of mobility, there are a French company called BlaBlaCar, which it's like hitchhikers, but with technology. So you can say, I want to go from this city to the other one. And if this matches with a driver who has some space in his car, you can just say, okay, for some money, I can take you there. And another one is still linked with the mobility. It's when I used to live in New York, and there's a company, I don't know if it's in other cities in the US, called Via, which is a mix between Uber and a bus, which is like a big cars. You can sit 7 or 8 people inside. And it's so it's a way, and they are you have to walk to some place, so they just meet you and they can take you everywhere you want if it's part of their route, of their course. And for me, it's something also like a middle. It's new narrative, but it's like you can have a Uber, but it's less expensive, and it's not the best because you are very few people, and so you're seated in a very comfort car.
It's a variation of Uber.
Yes.
So it's actually a narrative that is based on the story that Uber works and it's good, it's established. And so it's an evolution of it. But there are parts of the narrative that, are still available, for there is white space there. And so there is space for a new company to evolve that narrative even further in the minds of people.
Exactly.
Okay.
Guillaume, after someone has a new narrative like Frostbury and he's at the far right end of that scale, immediately people try to imitate and optimize what he did. So does that narrative start to slide leftward and become more of an optimization story?
Yeah, absolutely. It's what was new one day becomes old, and so that's a concept actually I'd like to cover in our next session, and tie to the process of how we go from new to old, and then borrow from this idea of the S curve. But it's absolutely, there is a time component to it. Yes. And if you can think so you can think of the Apple first iPod. It was the first device with 1,000 songs in your pocket. It was really, really out there. And then quickly after that, a lot of followers came, and the narrative, was more and more about how do we optimize. It was not a narrative anymore. It was just a combination of story there. It became a more mature, established, and regimented narrative.
And if I may, another company I love, it's Blue Apron. So it's another example of the evolution of a narrative. You used to get your pizzas or delivered to your home, or your grocery delivered to your home. But with Blue Apron, you have just all the components to prepare your own meal. So for me, it's a good evolution, and it's a new narrative in food delivery, already existing.
Right. Apron, I think it's. How do you spell apron?
APRON.
Thank you. Okay, good. That's great. So I'll leave you with that, and you'll find this in the Google Doc. I'll share it again. I promised I would send a link to the Google Doc, which I didn't do last time. Promise I will do it. I know some of you already have it. I'll put it here in the chat in just a second. But the main point out of this first pattern is that, and then there's a few points. It's really important to make the distinction between story and narrative, and be very cognizant about which one are we trying to build, which direction are we trying to go, because the methods and the process are completely different, and that's what we're going to see over the next sessions. This is a foundational starting point that I felt very excited and compelled to clarify, because in my own journey, I used to use the word story and narrative kind of, interchangeably as synonyms, until I realized, wait, there are two words for a reason. Why is that? And in scratching the surface, I feel like there is potential in digging more and finding out what the differences are, so that we're just better business leaders. One of the things I would say is that it's highly tied to your strategy. This is the job of somebody who's responsible for creating future value in an organization. Whereas storytelling is very commonly associated to art and marketing. And we understand it almost as, hey, let's put this shiny wrapper around our product to just make it more compelling, right? I see it differently. I see it really as being the core, the kernel of what your product should be. So my view on this, and that's another pattern that I already wrote about, is that narrative should come first. Narrative should come first, not at the end. Because if you do this, maybe you're missing a big opportunity. So I will leave you with that. Good luck using and creating a narrative this week. I see a question, and then I'll post a link to the Google document. Can you please leave us with basic checklist of structural guide points that define a narrative? that's what the document is about, David. So let me share it right now. And like I said, it's a work in progress, so there'll be more updates. Please go, once you have it, go to the document and highlight what you find interesting, what you find clear, compelling, and where the areas also where you find like, hey, maybe you need to add a little more here. I'm not sure I get that point. All right, let me go to that document right here.
Also, Guillaume, maybe you could take a
There you
little
go.
picture of your board and send that to us as well.
Sure.
That'd be great. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, the idea, David, is also that, you know, in doing those sessions, is that I kind of prototype new thinkings and new visuals with you. And if they're good enough, I can clean them up and add that to the book.
Oh, great.
Did you get the link? Grab it while you can, because once
it's not in the chat. Did you send it?
Oh, sorry, I sent it to only one person on accident. Everyone. There you go.
Glad you checked.
Thanks, David.
Okay.
You should have it now.
Yep. Okay, great.
Got it?
Yes, sir.
That should give you access to the document with comments. Daniel, again, sorry for not sending it. You got it. Very cool. We're a little bit over the time allotted. I want to get you on the way to your day, if it's starting, or the evening, if it's starting too. Thank you so much for tuning in. I really appreciate you taking the risk and, you know, to join and participating in this and carving out the time. I will see you next Thursday at 9 a.m. Pacific. I will end it here. If anybody has more questions, burning questions, happy to answer them. Otherwise, I'll close the call.
Thanks very much.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
That was great.
All right. Thanks, Joshua. Thanks you so much for coming. Thanks, David. Good to see you again.
You too.
Thanks, Guillaume.
Take care.